You're confused about whether you should use a virtual address, a P.O. box, or just your registered agent address. You're not alone. And here's the thing. The rules around business addresses are changing fast, especially when it comes to banks and business funding. Specifically, many banks are now rejecting virtual addresses for credit card applications and business accounts because of increased fraud and defaults, which means what worked 6 months ago might not work today. But you also need to protect your privacy and keep your home address off public records, so you're stuck trying to figure out which address type is legally acceptable, which one banks will accept, and which one will actually protect your personal information. I want to walk you through exactly what's happening with virtual addresses, what still works, and what you need to know before you make this decision. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so let's start by breaking down the 3 main types of addresses you'll encounter when forming an LLC, because this is where most of the confusion comes from. So first of all, you have a P.O. box. This is a mailbox at the post office where you can receive mail. It's cheap, usually costing $50 to $300 per year, depending on the box size and location. But here's the problem. A P.O. box is not legally acceptable for LLC registration in most states. Why? Because state law requires you to have a physical street address where legal documents can be served. A P.O. box doesn't count as a physical address, so you cannot use it as your principal business address on your articles of organization. Next, you have a virtual business address, which is also called a virtual office. This is a real physical street address provided by a company that receives mail on your behalf. They scan your mail, forward it to you, or hold it for pickup. The key difference from a P.O. box is that a virtual address looks like a real street address, so it's legally acceptable in most states for your principal business address. Virtual addresses typically cost $10 to $100 per month, depending on the location and services included. And finally, you have your registered agent address. This is the legal address where your LLC receives official government notices, legal summons, and service of process. Every LLC is required by law to have a registered agent with a physical address in the state where you form your LLC. Your registered agent can be yourself if you live in that state, or you can hire a registered agent service for $50 to $150 per year. Now, here's one that surprises many of my clients. Your registered agent address and your principal business address can be different. In fact, for privacy reasons, many entrepreneurs use their registered agent address for legal compliance, but list a separate virtual address or home address as their principal business address. Now, let's talk about what's actually changing in the banking industry when it comes to virtual addresses. And I want you to pay attention here because this is hot off the press and it's affecting thousands of business owners right now. So first of all, most banks, especially when you're applying for business credit cards or 0% APR business funding, are no longer accepting virtual addresses. Why? Because there's been a massive increase in fraud, defaults, and chargebacks from businesses using virtual addresses. Banks couldn't reach these business owners to collect on debts, and they realized that many of these addresses were just mail forwarding services with no real business operations behind them. Next, banks now want to see your actual home address listed as your business address on credit applications. This is a major shift from just a year ago when virtual addresses were widely accepted. Now, banks like Chase, American Express, and others are specifically flagging virtual office addresses and rejecting applications if they detect you're using one. You also need to understand that this doesn't mean virtual addresses are completely dead. You can still use a virtual address on your LLC formation documents for privacy protection. The issue is specifically with bank applications and business credit applications. So you might have a virtual address on your LLC paperwork, but when you apply for a bank account or credit card, you should be using your actual home address. Now, believe it or not, this is causing a privacy dilemma for many business owners. On one hand, you don't want your home address on public LLC records where anyone can Google your business name and find where you live. On the other hand, banks now require your real address for fraud prevention, which is exactly why understanding how to use different addresses for different purposes is so important. Now, with all of that said, you're probably wondering, okay, Philip, so what should I actually do? So let's talk about it. Let me break down what still works and what doesn't in 2026. So first of all, for your LLC formation documents, you can and should still use a virtual business address to protect your privacy. When you file your articles of organization with the state, you're allowed to list a virtual address as your principal business address in most states. This keeps your home address off public records. Next, for your registered agent requirement, you must have a physical address in your state of formation. You can hire a registered agent service like Northwest Registered Agent, Busy, or Zen Business to handle this for you. This address will appear on public records, but it's clearly marked as your registered agent, not your personal address. It's free for the first year, completely free of charge when you form a business or LLC through Busy. Link in the video description. Plus, for bank account applications and business credit cards, you should now be using your actual home address. This is the big change. Even if your LLC paperwork shows a virtual address, when you fill out bank applications, use your real residential address. Banks are cross-referencing addresses now, and they will reject applications if they detect a virtual office. And finally, if you're concerned about privacy, here's the strategy. Use a virtual address on your LLC formation to keep your home off public records. Hire a registered agent for legal compliance, and then use your home address only on bank applications. This gives you privacy protection while still meeting bank requirements. Now, usually when clients start calling me to help them is when they've been rejected by a bank because of their virtual address. And now they're trying to figure out how to fix it. This is when understanding the right address strategy from the beginning becomes very important. So let's switch gears here for a little bit and talk about which virtual address services are still reliable if you decide to go this route, because many of them are getting flagged by banks now. So first of all, Alliance Virtual Offices is one of the few companies that's still flying under the radar and not getting flagged as aggressively by banks. They provide real street addresses in major cities, mail scanning, mail forwarding, and even phone answering services. Their pricing typically ranges from $49 to $99 per month, depending on the location and services you choose. Plus, the important thing to remember is that virtual addresses are still useful for privacy protection on your LLC paperwork and for receiving business mail. They're just not the right choice anymore when you're applying for business bank accounts or credit cards. Understanding which services still work and how to use them strategically is key to protecting your privacy while still getting approved for the banking and funding you need for your business. Now, at the time of this video, around virtual addresses and business banking is changing rapidly. What worked last year might not work today, and what works today might not work 6 months from now. The key is to stay informed. Use virtual addresses strategically for privacy on your LLC formation, but be prepared to use your real home address when dealing with banks and lenders. Just remember, your registered agent address, your virtual business address, and your banking address can all be different, and that's completely legal as long as you're using each one for its intended purpose. Now, look, forming an LLC yourself is very stressful, and as someone who has formed LLCs for most of my businesses, I won't recommend the DIY approach, but use LLC services. All you need to do is avoid overpaying for any services. Make sure to use our LLC cost calculator. The link is inside the video description. Thank you for watching.